everyone, and welcome to Two Broads Talking Politics. Tonight is our part two of our discussion of Hillary Clinton's new novel or new book, What Happened? And we have again with us Megan.
Hello.
She's a writer, and we have Esther.
Hello.
She, what's your title again?
And I'm a co-leader in Indivisible, local Southside chapter of Indivisible.
Gotcha. So today we are gonna finish up our discussion of the book. We have a couple of discussion questions left to talk about. But first we did want to just mention what has happened in the news. Last night, a man killed over 50 people and injured over 200 in a mass shooting in Las Vegas. He shot into a crowd of people at a concert. This was the worst mass shooting in U.S. history, and this is the second time in 2 years that we've said that. So I just wanted to say, first of all, at the podcast, our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and their families, and to see, just gauge everyone's reactions to what just happened.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is Kelly. It's horrible. It's terrifying. It's maddening to think that someone who shouldn't have had guns at all had something like 19 guns in this hotel room. And it's, once again, I think we're going to have this debate about whether you can politicize this. And I think you have to. I mean, we should not be a society where people who shouldn't have guns at all have this many guns, where people have automatic rifles for no reason at all. I mean, there is no legitimate basis on which an individual citizen should have guns like this. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, but it seems like every time we have a shooting like this, there's talk on the left about how we need to do something about this, and then it all goes away and nobody does anything.
Yeah, and we have to talk about it right after, because as it turns out, it's always right after. There's a mass shooting. There were something like 275 last year. Like, when is the gap long enough that we are allowed to talk about it immediately? We just don't have a choice.
I also think it's, this is Esther, that I think we have to start holding people who say, yes, but I'm a responsible gun owner and I enjoy, shooting, whatever it happens to be, to say that might be true. You might be an absolutely responsible gun owner. You use it for sport and recreation, and you legitimately would never harm anyone. Your ability to participate in sport means that we will have these events. And what is it about that entertainment value, that pleasure you get, that makes it okay, that you're okay with occasionally 50 people being shot at one time and people being shot and having access to weapons to kill themselves all the time, right? Like, You might never kill yourself. You might never kill anyone else. You might just use it for target practice and enjoy it and be responsible in the best possible sense. But is your right to enjoy target practice worth somebody else's life?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think we have to start framing it in terms of rights, like you said. Like, is your right to own a gun more important than my right to walk down the street without getting shot to death? I have rights too, the right to not be murdered, and I think that we have to start talking in terms of rights, because that seems to be the only thing that the pro-gun lobby is interested in.
I'm also really running out of I'm really running out of patience for this sort of idea that we have to respect the law-abiding gun owners, and they're all good gun owners. Okay, well, in 2014, in the parish that I live in, that we call counties parishes in Louisiana, 200 guns were stolen out of unlocked cars. So I'm like running out of patience for this idea that there are all these 200 guns were stolen out of unlocked cars. Where are the responsible gun owners, and why aren't they like, oh my gosh, I am up in arms about this? No, they're not. They don't, it's like, well, but I'm responsible. Okay, well, get your friends.
And there should be accountability for not taking care of a weapon. I mean, there's potentially accountability if you don't keep track of your car or any other property you own. If you don't maintain your property, that's a problem. and you are held accountable if something bad happens, because if you don't put proper gates around your pool, you have to pay exorbitant, even more in insurance. And if somebody stumbles into your yard and you don't have a gate around your pool and they fall in, that's, that could be on you. And so it should be on you to take care of your weapon. But again, like, fine, I'll give you, there's a right to own a gun, but there's a right to not get shot too. And at sometimes rights conflict. I do think, yes, let's talk about that. There are conflicting rights here. And when that happens, we have to have a conversation about which of those is more important and which will be the one that's enforced. And right now, we're not enforcing the right to life. We're enforcing the right to own a gun. And I think that's it's infuriating that's the choice and that's just the choice, whether we like it or not. That is the choice that as a country we have made.
And to bring this back to Hillary and to bring it back to the book, she has a section where she talks about guns, and I looked it up today, and she talks about how Wayne LaPierre really made the NRA into something that isn't promoting the rights of gun owners. It's promoting the rights of gun corporations in the interest of gun corporations. She cites this study that's from June of this year, so not very long ago, just a few months ago, where 94% of Americans support thorough background checks for owning a gun, and that includes 92% of gun owners. So this isn't gun owners saying, please make it easier to get assault rifles. This is gun corporations making it easier, wanting to make it easier because they want to make money. And so it's, of course, not in any way surprising that the Trump administration or the Republican Party would come down on the side of corporations. This is common, but, I think Democratic politicians need to stop being so afraid of the NRA.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
I agree, and I think what is surprising to me all the time is the Republican reaction to these shootings tends to be to try and bring it back to mental health, which, first of all, people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violent crimes than to perpetrate them. But there's just something pretty deliciously ironic about Republicans trying to talk about mental health and, it's so important, we need to get people into treatment and blah, 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 when they're trying to repeal the ACA and make it harder for people to access mental health resources. So that always annoys me.
Yes. So we need our side version of the NRA.
Yeah.
Surely there are enough of us who would contribute money toward a powerful political organization that was strongly opposed to guns.
I mean, every town is sort of that. And Mom's Demand as a sort of I think they're related, right? Every town is the PAC, and Mom's Demand is the Mom's Demand Action for Gun. What is it? Mom's Demand Action for Gun something. Mom's Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. That's what it is. And Every Town for Gun Safety. And Bloomberg founded it and funded it pretty heavily after Sandy Hook. I think they do. I have a lot of friends who are involved with it. They do a lot of work. At some point, though, it's like it's sort of like building sandcastles against the tide. It feels like it feels insurmountable to me, more than almost any other thing in the United States, policy-wise. Guns just feels impossible.
It feels that way, but it must not be that way.
It can't be, right? I mean, I realize that I'm just being a nihilist here, and just because it's impossible doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't try anyway and do everything we can anyway. But wow, it's really hard.
But we need to start holding Democratic candidates accountable for this as well.
Yes.
And not letting them slide on, just not doing anything, about talking a good game right after something happens and then not actually doing anything.
Well, on that note, why don't we move forward with talking about the book? So one of the questions, I just want to start out with one of the questions that we didn't do last time. This one's sort of general. What did this book do well, and what did it do poorly?
So the only thing I could really think about what it did poorly, but I think this is important, is that it tried to do too much. So at the beginning of the chapter on sexism, Hillary says, I could write a whole book about this. And I was like, yes, I want to read that book. Write a whole book about sexism in politics. But it goes in so many directions. I mean, perhaps it's the same sort of thing about what was problematic about her campaign, right? She has so many ideas. There's so many interesting paths this could take that it's kind of all over the place. And it's all really interesting, but I think this could have been at least 3 separate, interesting books.
But I would agree that there's some of that, like that when she doesn't go into as much detail, I think there's in a similar way, when she kind of tries to do almost like a TikTok of the Russian and hacking and how they as a campaign were dealing with it. It was so in this attempt to be comprehensive and really hit the main points, which is useful and it as a resource will be very useful going forward. But what I felt kind of missing in that moment was kind of what it felt like to be in the moment of trying to uncover this and it felt almost more reflective rather than getting back into what it felt like to be in the campaign, realizing something was happening, not really knowing what it was exactly. And I was kind of interested in how they were trying to deal with it. And that seemed to go away in this attempt to be this encompassing kind of a historical document of what happened, at least as far as she knew when she wrote the book. And so that was something that I don't think she did poorly. It wasn't bad. It wasn't uninteresting or untruthful or inaccurate. It was, in this case, as much as she could not have done much more in this book, the thing I wanted to know is what was it like to be in a campaign when you didn't know what was happening because it had never really happened before. And yet you knew something was wrong and they knew things were, they could tell, it seemed, based on what other people have talked about, that there was something weird happening and they couldn't quite figure it out and they had to try and deal with it. And that kind of that personal account be lost a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So Clinton goes on to talk about a lot of factors in her defeat in the book. So including the Comey letter, when James Comey released his letter to Congress saying that he had some more concerns about the emails, the Russian interference, as we said, and the rise of fake news. How persuasive did you find her claims? Which one would you say you found the most persuasive, and which one would you say you found the least persuasive?
Well, I can start a little bit. This is Esther. I thought, so the thing for me that I think we have to, there's 2 ways of approaching this question and it seems to me it's not really why she lost. There are 2 things, kind of why she lost, like what tipped the scale, I guess. Is there one thing that tipped the scale? And then really, I think what people are asking is, why was it so freaking close? And, she, in terms of, what was the thing she couldn't overcome finally? I think I found it very the argument about the Comey letter, that all of these other things had happened and you can find some more or less compelling of why it was close. But the thing that could not be overcome, perhaps because of the timing, perhaps because of how it reinforced kind of the other claims and attacks that had been made about her throughout the primary, the general election, but that was the thing that couldn't be beaten, was the Comey letter. I found that compelling.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The Comey letter was the one I found the most compelling as well, and for the same reasons, especially the timing of the letter. It seems just like it couldn't have been overcome. I did find the argument about the primaries a little less convincing, probably the least convincing argument to me. Again, to refresh from last episode, I was a former Bernie Sanders supporter,